Paul, mission and message. Let's look first at the mission of Paul, and then we're going to talk about the message.
Okay. We looked at Paul's diverse background in both Judaism and Greco-Roman society and how powerful this was for his mission. And I can't help but think how wrong we are when we are trying to protect ourselves by isolation. This is not our mission, and it's not helping our mission. Can we understand the people around us? Can we relate to them? This was the power of Paul. He was able to relate to different people of his time and to make his message relevant to them.
Some people rely on wisdom, like the Greeks, and some people rely on signs from heaven, like the Jews, to affirm their faith in God. And I can see how easily some of our contemporaries today can qualify Paul as a manipulator of our mind, who, knowing their culture, the Greeks and the Jews' culture and background, took full advantage and linked his message with what they were already fond of. But if you ask me personally, this is exactly what I think it takes to go and be a missionary.
How can I explain to my neighbor why do I believe in a way that can make sense to him? How can I explain to my coworker what do I believe in a way that he can relate to it? These are big challenges that are very different in our specific environments that we live in. But imagine all these people listening to Paul and saying, okay, there is something here, but what's next? How do you communicate Christian growth, your new values in life, your experiences and challenges that you encounter? Paul used references to things that they could relate to, like soldiers, athletes, competitions.
And I would say that Adventists are pretty much against warfare and unofficially holding a position against competitive sports. Would you agree? So where does Paul's metaphors of soldiers and athletes fit in our spiritual experience? How about in commitment? How about in persistence and endurance, in sacrifice, in self-control, and many other traits of the character? Don't they fit in best way in the character of an athlete or a soldier? I would ask.
We can be judgmental instead of trying to share and teach. But the message was relevant to Paul's listeners, and he conveyed some very deep truths through it.
Okay, moving on. What is Paul's message?
Good question. It's Christ and Him crucified, but this is not so easy to understand. Maybe we will never completely understand it. What does it mean for my daily life? For my own personal struggles and goals in life? How should I live? How can we live as community?
It's interesting that the lesson does not narrow down our attention on the message of the justification by faith. I would say a strong point of Paul's letters. However, we're reminded of how much emphasis Paul puts on the knowledge and acceptance of the law. And being a strong advocate of the Gentiles and therefore filtering the important from the unimportant and the eternal from the temporal, Paul, sets aside the observance of the 10 principles written by God's finger from what was observed as practices by the Jewish nation. And this is a challenging topic nowadays.
We do struggle, and some even blame Paul for making things too complicated. But human salvation is not something that can be comprehended just rationally. In fact, it's perceived by many as foolishness. You have to engage and experience it. This is how we grow and understand it better. Things change, norms change, practices change, we change. God's love for us, His character, His dedication to us, they don't change. And if you keep our focus on this relationship, we're in for an adventure.
Of course. And keeping our thoughts on the message, as Paul alone says, he had focused his attention primarily on Jesus, and Jesus on the cross, and Jesus resurrected. And according to Paul, everything connects. Everything is complete in those 2 points in Jesus' life. And if everything else is confusing or unclear, then those 2 points should remain clear.
How we see ourselves and how we see God affects our relationship, and these basic concepts were very important for Paul to clear. We exist only because of the gift of life that God gave us. When we die, we are gone. God is the source of life, and He overcame the reason because of which we die. He wants us to live, and He is fully committed to that. This understanding changes perspectives. It affects how we live, why we live, how we relate to others, the things that can scare us or stimulate us. But we all have so much baggage. The journey is very individual. I mean, just look at the last part of the lesson.
Isn't Mark from Acts somebody that we remember well, don't we? And not surprisingly so, even Paul, a great apostle, has messed it up once in his life, and we know it for a fact. What a drama. But here is where the gospel shines. Through the kindness of Barnabas and the forgiveness and the repentance of Paul.
I like how the lesson ends. Getting along.
Getting along.
No one is perfect, and our mission is not perfection. We are not the same, and we will never be the same. Getting along, learning how to live along, is part of our mission.
Paul had a difficult and enormous mission to accomplish, but did he not do it a great justice?